All right, Brett Ender, Meat Mafia. Brett, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, brother. I was just saying, we go back a long ways. I think it was either 2017 or 2018 in New York City that we met for the first time. So
hmm
it's great to be on your show, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, dude, I helped you and a couple buddies find a three-bedroom apartment in Midtown East. I was your real estate agent, and yeah, that was what 7, 8 years ago, probably, and that was a nifty little apartment there. I remember it. I think it was a walk-up. It had some decent finishes. Bigger and better things today, though.
Totally, man. No, you got the job done. You found us a great spot in our budget, but I do remember just because I think we probably looked at maybe four or five places together. So we were in the cab rides a bunch, and I really felt like we clicked. And I think we were starting to dig into some of the personal growth stuff and the mindset stuff, and that's just snowballed the last couple of years. But I remember really having that connection with you, and I knew that even though you are a real estate broker, we were going to end up being good friends. So yeah, man, I'm grateful for it all.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, you're the second Brett that I've had on the show, so always exciting to be chatting with a fellow Brett, especially one that spells his name correctly with two T's. Those one T Bretts, you can't trust those guys.
I've never met a trustworthy one that spells it with one T.
So I think the last time I saw you, actually, I think we got dinner, and we got dinner at a Mexican restaurant called Jose Tejas. I don't know if you recall that meeting.
I
That
do.
was yeah, I think that was the last time I've seen you actually face to face, and we were just kind of chatting about life. I think at the time you were still in corporate America. You were still just churning and burning sales in New York City, and by all means, you were doing well. But I could see a little bit of kind of a gleam in your eye. I could tell that you kind of wanted something else from life, something more from life. And fast forward to today, you're a phenomenally successful entrepreneur. You built this Meat Mafia brand. You've got a podcast that's getting thousands of downloads per week. You launched Noble Origins protein powder, which is doing really well. Take us through that journey. How'd you go from W-2 corporate America doing well, but not totally fulfilled to today, ultra successful entrepreneur that's really living his, full life?
Yeah, man. I really appreciate the kind words, and I think you were spot on that there was that. So when we got dinner, I think that was 2020,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty crazy that it's been about 4 years since I've seen you in person. Testament to social media and just being able to keep in touch virtually as well. But I would say that I was one of those people where COVID was a catalyst for significant change in the positive direction. And so when you and I first met, I had recently graduated college and I really left school feeling like I had kind of pissed away my potential, to be honest with you. I played college baseball, had a bunch of Division I scholarships, ended up getting cut from the Seton Hall baseball team, even though I was on a 75% scholarship. Transferred to Babson, good business school up in Boston, was a decent student. I felt like I really could have been a good student and applied myself more. Was binge drinking every weekend, eating a ton of processed foods. Just really not, I like the feeling of when my head would hit the pillow. I just knew that there was a lot more potential that was locked inside of me. And so my senior year, I actually got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So I started having really terrible gut issues, which I think was a reflection of just the way that I was living my life, being chronically stressed out, not eating well, binge drinking, all the factors that I just talked about. And so what ulcerative colitis is it's an incurable autoimmune disease where you essentially build up so much inflammation from poor decisions compounded over time that your colon just kind of like it almost metastasizes and forms these bloody ulcers on it. So you can't really
Oof.
process anything that you're eating. So the year before, actually 2 years before I met you, I was interning in New York. And dude, like in full transparency, like I was shitting blood 30 times a day, ended up going to the hospital, put on oral steroids, biologic drugs, like this whole cocktail of medication to try and treat what was going on. Um, and so basically I ended up going back for my senior year. I really had this pivotal moment where I graduated, that feeling of like, you're 21 now and you have a lot of potential, but if you keep going on the path that you're on, when you hit 30, I feel like people don't really see you for your potential. They just kind of view you for how you are in the world.
Sure.
And time is short. And I really just remember drilling that mindset into my brain. So what I started first doing was I was listening to a lot of Jocko Willink. I was listening to a lot of David Goggins. And David Goggins' message is so simple. It's kind of like lace up your running shoes and start running, and really good things will happen. So I really I started with 3 miles on the treadmill at a 10-minute pace. I would put the towel on it so I wouldn't count down, made it go by a little bit quicker.
Cool.
And I remember doing that first run being like, wow, this is the first time I've ever run 3 miles on my own. What else am I capable of? That ended up leading to, half marathons, full distance marathons, triathlons, Ironmans, etc. So that really created a really good body of endurance work where I started to transform physically. And then the nutrition piece was massive because I was still taking all these drugs for the ulcerative colitis that I had. And in 2019, the year after I met you, the carnivore diet started to get more
Right,
popularized.
right.
So, yeah. And so a lot of the content around the carnivore diet was essentially animal products are wrongly demonized. They're the most nutrient dense foods that you can be eating, and they're incredibly bioavailable, which means that your body can actually digest and absorb those nutrients. A lot of grains, even certain fruits and vegetables, you see them ranking high on the nutritional scale, but their bioavailability is actually much lower than meat. So you're not
Interesting.
processing and digesting it. And then the kicker was the more research I was doing, I was finding other people anecdotally that had colitis, Crohn's, IBD, autoimmune disease that were claiming that they were curing their diseases by following this diet for an extended period of time. And that was really the kicker for me because I did have this thought process of, what if I could cure this thing holistically? What would my life look like if I didn't have to be dependent on these drugs? What kind of person would I become? What kind of confidence would I get from that? And so I just went all in on this diet, man. I went to the Whole Foods up on like 57th Street or on the Upper East Side.
Love it. That's a nice
Yeah,
one.
it's a good one. It's a good one. Just, yeah, man. I loaded up on ground beef, steak, fatty cuts of meat, eggs, cheese, chicken thighs. I was still drinking coffee, so coffee is technically a plant, so it's not super strict carnivore. But that was the first time in my life where I stuck to a particular group of foods, cooked my meals, and was just all in. It kind of had this mental shift that I could heal. And Brett, the thing that I noticed was the more that I was doing the diet, the better I was feeling. Like the burning sensation in my gut was going away. My skin
How
was getting
cool.
healthier. Yeah, my energy was getting better, and I responded incredibly well to it. And just once you get that first taste of those beginner gains, you want to go all in on it.
For sure.
And so flash forward, I essentially did that diet strict for about 2 years. Ended up going back to my doctor in 2021. And then when you have ulcerative colitis, you do have an increased risk of getting colon cancer. So you have to do a colonoscopy. And so when he did the colonoscopy on me, not only did I have zero inflammation, I had zero microinflammation. So even though he didn't tell me this, because Western medicine isn't taught to speak this way, I deem that as being medically cured. And he was actually comfortable getting me off of all the drugs and meds. So it's been about 3 years. I've been completely drug free and feel the best that I've ever felt.
That's
So
wild, man.
yeah,
That is nuts. Curious, do you still stick to that diet today? Like avoiding most plant foods besides coffee?
That's a great question. So short answer is I don't, to be honest with you. And so the way that I've changed over the years is that I think the carnivore diet is an amazing removal diet that I think anyone would benefit from it, whether it's 2 weeks, 30 days, an extended period of time.
Sure.
Some people like me are more severe cases, so you do have to go on it a little bit more long term. But it's so good at getting inflammation out of your body, which really is the root cause of all modern disease in the United States. And then now that I have this really permeable gut, I can have some vegetables, I can have some fruits, I can have some milk. If I'm back in Jersey and I want to get a pizza with my family, I can have that and not feel terrible the way that I used to, 6+ years ago. And so
Love
it's
it.
all about balance, man. So I'm trying not to be as dogmatic. I just keep it really simple. Like last night after the gym, I had, probably 10 ounces of steak with some broccoli, some sweet potatoes, seasoned it up really well. And yeah, just kind of like diverse food plates, but everything is pretty much focused around animal protein. And then I pick
Cool.
and choose what I want to add to the
Love
plate.
it. Gotta love that permeable gut, right? Can't be understated. Can't be understated. You really can't. Anyway, I kind of threw you off track there. So
No, no.
when did the idea of, Meat Mafia come into existence? When did you get hit with that lightning bolt that like, maybe this is something I should go all in on?
Yeah, I always go back to Joe Rogan said this quote. I forget who the author was. He was requoting it, but it was essentially like most men live lives of quiet desperation. And so when I was working
It's such a powerful quote. I think any guy that hears that quote feels that one in their soul, don't they? Right? Especially if it's a guy who's not necessarily going after something that they're passionate about. I think that quote speaks to the male soul more than any other, more powerfully than any other quote that I've ever heard, honestly.
Oh my gosh, dude, that is so well said. And I'm sure with all the clients that you've worked with in real estate, I'm sure you've met bankers, consultants, etc., and they love their work. They're passionate about it. They're charged up. They feel like they're contributing to society. If you have that feeling in your job, that's incredible, dude. Go all in on it. But I think there's also a lot of men that relate to what you said, where you're thinking to yourself, okay, I have this great job on paper,
Mhm.
but I don't know what it is. It just feels like there's a part of me that's locked up inside and there's something missing. I don't know what it is. It's just a feeling and I can't quantify it outside of that feeling.
Sounds like you were feeling that.
Definitely was definitely feeling it. And I realized, the reason why I liked what I was doing was that I was competitive and I loved building relationships from a sales perspective. But even in the insurtech job I was in, the consulting job that I was in, I wasn't inherently passionate about the work. I just found myself being a fairly competitive person. And then when I started to do more self analysis, I was obsessed with like just going all in from a nutrition perspective. And so people at work were noticing the changes in me, the lunches I was bringing, the way that I was going to the gym, the way that I was losing weight. And I noticed that anytime someone would ask me any questions at all, I would stop what I was doing and just fully focus on them. So if you came to me and you were like, hey, man, could you maybe help me get my diet dialed in a little bit? Could you teach me about carnivore? I would just stop what I was doing and just put together like a 5-page tailored plan for you for free, just
Love it.
because I love doing it.
Right.
And so it's really good common sense of like the thing that you want to do for free is probably the thing that you should be doing.
Yeah, I
But
think that's a good pointer for anyone out there that's kind of looking for something to really sink their teeth into is like, yeah, what can you talk about for minutes, hours on end just for fun? Like, if someone asks you a question and you're happily dropping everything in front of you just to talk about that topic, then maybe that is the thing that maybe that's your North Star that you should really be going after.
dude, 100%, man. That's so well said. And so this convergence of just like different thoughts and questioning things, it definitely happened in the beginning to the middle of COVID. Like I think a lot of men in our age bracket. And what ended up happening was I really wasn't in the Northeast. I really couldn't be in New York just due to like vaccinations and all that kind of stuff. So I was back living with my parents in New Jersey. Really had a lot of time to reflect, was continuing to dial in on my routine. And I reconnected with a good buddy from college, my business partner now, Harrison. And so he was up in Boston working a private equity real estate job. I was in New York, New Jersey doing this consulting job. And I realized he was the only friend from college that had a very similar mindset to what I had, where he was really into nutrition. He loved endurance racing, super adventurous, really just like he wanted to just take life by the horns. That was the vibe that I got. And he really felt like he was capable of a lot more. And I really resonated with a lot of those feelings. So what we did was we ended up signing up for Ironman Mont Tremblant up in Canada. So
Cool.
we did a ton of training for that, which really allowed us to reconnect. We weirdly just lost touch out of college because he's a grade above me, and so that allowed us to reconnect. And then what happened was because COVID laws were so strict in Canada in 2021, the race got canceled. So we took our race credit and rolled it into Ironman Waco, and then got an Airbnb in Austin for a couple months.
Cool.
And so that experience of just like kind of breaking out of the Northeast for the first time in my life,
Sure.
being in a city like Austin, truly is like this health and wellness renaissance hub. And then living with someone like that, where you're just feeding off of each other's energy. And we were, talking about the food system, just talking about life philosophy, so many different things, entrepreneurship. And we essentially left that Airbnb stint being like, we just have to find some way to work together because the combined energy is just too good. But we didn't have a business model. So we were partnership first, business model second, which is
Okay.
very counterintuitive to
For
how
sure.
a lot of partnerships start. But I think more partnerships should start that way, to be honest with you, because when you have that brother or that comrade that's in that you want to be in the trenches with regardless, that's a really good step in the right direction. And so what we decided was we had both been consuming a lot of content on Twitter. These anonymous health accounts were a really big thing in 2021. So we spun up these like anonymous mafioso names and just started cranking content on Twitter, like writing blog posts, writing Twitter threads, doing a ton of research. Literally no vision outside of creating content. And it felt so good to just create something for the
I
first
remember that. What was your handle again? It was something hilarious and awesome.
Mr. Salazzo from The Godfather. And then Harry was Carney Clemenza. We didn't show our faces at all. So
I remember remember that. Yeah, but I remember your Twitter was like blowing up. But we have, a mutual friend, Chris Leach. And I remember thinking he told me one day, he's like, dude, you should check out Brett's Twitter right now. He's going off right now with the health talk. So curious what that process looked like for you, because I think a lot of people are like interested by Twitter, but they don't really know how to engage with it or succeed on it. Did you like you would just do like an hour of research and then write a thread based on that research? Is that kind of how it would go down?
Yeah, so I saw a bunch of accounts pop off during COVID, and then the two that stuck out to me were Sahil Bloom and then Nick Huber. And so Sahil Bloom is more like kind of finance, started off really heavy finance. Now it's more personal
Mhm.
development. Huber's big into real estate, sweaty startup, buying small businesses, buying unsexy businesses. And so I noticed their playbook was that they were very just like education focused, just focused on giving as much free education to their audience as possible and telling stories as well. And so my thought process and Harry's thought process was, how do we take this approach that we've seen work and just tailor it to nutrition? And what we discovered was that when you look at the metabolic health crisis that this country is currently in, it comes down to like a handful of different events and stories throughout the last 50 to 100 years. And so we just told a lot of those stories. So to your point, yes, it would probably be about an hour to 2 hours of research. And then I would use this tool called Typefully, which basically allows you to schedule out your tweets. And I would put a skeleton together of the thread. How did I want it to read? What was like the hook that I really wanted? What did I want the body of the tweet to look like? And then I would just pop in a lot of the information from the research, edit it, refine it, post it. And at my peak, I was probably doing 2 to 3 of those a day. And that was while I was working a corporate job too. So I just kind of made, I was honestly treating thread writing more seriously than my corporate job.
Got it.
And we were fortunate where people really responded to the content and it just started popping off, where it was like a couple thousand followers and 10,000 followers. And then there were two threads in particular that just went absolutely nuclear. And I went from 10,000 to 35,000 on one. And then another one, I went from like 35,000 to 65,000. And the rest was kind of history.
That's wild, brother. Did you change the name back to your actual name, or is it still operating under the fake name there?
No, we decided to go public about a year ago.
Okay.
And part of that thought process was, similar to you, we decided to start a podcast about 2 years ago called the Meat Mafia Podcast. And so we were doing video content, we're interviewing people. And I think we also just had this realization of, if you want to be a true leader in the space and have a true positive impact, I don't think you can do that by being anonymous. I think it does limit your footprint for sure. And so that was our decision, was to just kind of like dox ourselves and go public. And it was probably, one of the best decisions we've made. So yeah, we've been public for a little over a year.
Cool. So the podcast idea came directly, basically, from the popularity of the tweets.
Yeah, so written was our first vehicle to create content, and then we had a really honest conversation around, we're very good at research, there's a lot that we know, but we should create a show, an interview style show, where we can interview the true nutrition specialists and the true health specialists and ask the questions that we think a lot of like conscious consumers and audience members want to know. So not being the authority figure, more so being like the curious host. And that's really what we did. And then we just started, similar to threads, we just started cranking volume in the beginning, where like, I think June 2022, I think we literally recorded and released 35 podcasts. Like I
That's
remember
wild.
having I remember having a day where we did 4 or 5 in a single day. But dude, that volume approach, just going all in, that's really what worked for us. And it gave us a lot of confidence, because we did have imposter syndrome. Like I'd never created content before. And
Sure.
I think you do have a lot of those mental barriers around like, what do I really have value to offer? And I think the more reps that we put in, it just kind of hammered in that identity of like, no, you guys do know a lot about health and wellness and nutrition, and you do have a lot of value that you can share to the world. And then the audience becomes receptive to it. And then all that momentum builds. So us investing a lot of reps in the beginning was huge for multiple reasons.
For sure. 30 plus podcast episodes in 1 month is an outlandish number. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I can't even, I mean, as a podcast host, I got to tell you, just booking, 30 guests over the course of a year is a lot of work.
it is.
Getting 30 people to sit down with you in a single calendar month is some hardcore shit, and I respect that.
Thank you.
That is wild. Curious, were all those in-person interviews, or were a lot of those virtual?
They were virtual. And the reason why the first year was virtual is because I actually after the Airbnb experience with Harry and Austin, I really wanted to do a year in San Diego. This was
Hmm.
before we had even started the brand. My plan was to go to San Diego, be on the beach, do some triathlon training, just kind of get out of the Northeast and just experience California.
Sure.
So I was in San Diego. Harry stayed in Austin, so we were forced to do it virtually. And then once the show really started to take on some critical mass and some monetization opportunities popped up, we had a very honest conversation around if we want to compound, we have to be in the same city. Austin was that, huge health and wellness capital in the United States. So I ended up moving to Austin in November of 2022. And then I've been here ever since with Harry.
Very cool, brother. So, how many shows a week were you releasing? Were you pumping out like 3 a week at that point? Was that the release schedule?
It was like 3 to 5, I would say. And then it cut down to like a consistent 3. And it's kind of stayed at 2 to 3 for like the last year.
Cool. Very cool. I think that is like a key takeaway for anyone that's trying to grow any social media platform, whether it be, Instagram or YouTube or especially podcasts, is you got to get the reps in, and there is just something to be said for volume of effort. And if you are putting those consistent reps out and you're putting out 2 to 3 episodes a week, your show is going to get noticed quicker and you're just going to get better at leading a conversation because of how much practice you're getting in those episodes by that sheer amount of content. So I think that's a huge lesson for anyone listening right now to take away. If you're trying to be a well-known creator and push a brand, volume is really your most important metric.
Definitely. No, that's such a good point. And I think it's just a great medium for new creators. I think Instagram almost seems like a peacocking competition a little bit where you're just overloaded with so much information, so many video clips, these 30-second clips of you trying to force this really thoughtful piece of content into a clip. It's kind of like fitting a square peg into a round hole. Whereas with a podcast, I think it can take the pressure off of you, where especially if it's an interview style show, you're not pretending to be the expert. You're just interviewing the expert and you're asking them really thoughtful questions that you want to know.
Sure.
And like you said, if all you ever got from the podcast was the ability to improve your public speaking, confidence around creating content, and then building an amazing network, which it will do because I think podcasting is the best networking tool that's ever existed, and you made $0 from it, you will transform as a person just from doing those things.
For sure. 100%. It really is a cool thing to be able to get face to face with like so many interesting, successful people from all over the world, all over the country for an hour or so at a time. And these are like face to face meetings that probably just wouldn't be happening, otherwise. So I agree. If you're starting a podcast just for the intention of a networking tool, that alone really makes it worth it. So I would imagine that having the massive Twitter following and kind of leveraging that to grow the podcast was probably key in your ability to grow the podcast as quickly as you have.
Definitely. Yeah, we were fortunate because we did have that following on Twitter. So the day that we launched, it wasn't a lot of downloads at all, but we immediately had an audience where they were kind of like Twitter was almost like our morsels of information.
Mm-hmm.
I think people were very curious because we were anonymous at that point. And then the podcast really allowed our audience to get to know Harry and I on a more personal level. So that was our natural progression too. I don't think it has to be that way. I think whatever you feel the most comfortable with, whether it's creating videos, recording podcasts, writing content, whatever that thing looks like for you, that's what you should lean in on. And that's ultimately what we did was we were really comfortable writing and then we got really comfortable speaking.
I like that. And I think, writing is really a good foundation for any creator's journey, right? I think just to get out a pen and paper or get out your laptop and keyboard and just set a timer for 15, 20 minutes and just do some writing on your niche within your topic that you're trying to teach people on, I think can be a foundational tool for any creator that's trying to get better across any media, really.
Mm. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting to me, like I feel like Twitter and X is kind of like this black box that most creators don't think about, but I think it's the most systematic way to grow something on social media because if you get really good at writing these threads, the algorithm really supports that and you can get an incredible amount of followers and a really loyal audience. And I think it's the best audience to have because if someone's following you on Twitter, they're following your content, which is really like your thoughts and your written word. So it's like a very intellectual, engaged, curious audience and it's a really hardcore audience too. So people will say, oh, Instagram has 4 times the amount of users than X. Why do I want to be on there? Because it's like I think you have a higher likelihood of finding your 1,000 true fans on Twitter than you might on some other platforms. And a podcast is very similar. If someone is going to take the time to listen to Brett for an hour and a half, they'll probably buy your protein powder. They'll probably buy your real estate course. So yeah, that's just a metric that I've thought about a lot the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of truth to that for sure. Curious, what's your writing process look like now? Do you still devote time to it on a weekly basis?
Dude, that's a great question. In full transparency, man, I have not written much content consistently the last year. And the reason why I haven't written as much content is there have been a few other businesses that have emerged through the audience that we've built that have taken up a lot of my time and attention. So the first business is actually a Twitter marketing agency. And so what we do is we actually create and build Twitter accounts for health and wellness brands. And so how that started was a couple of our early podcast sponsors, they reached out to us because they had been seeing the content we had put out for about a year. And they said, look, we've worked with different social media agencies. We've worked with different copywriting agencies. No one understands health and wellness the way that you guys are able to. Like the copy might be good, but the heart and soul of the content is missing.
Sure.
Would you guys be willing to just manage our Twitter accounts and ghostwrite for us for a monthly retainer? So literally, Harry and I were like, hey, should we charge this price? Yeah, let's do it. The client said yes to it. And so we took those first two clients and we built it out to a full service agency of about 20 clients right now. We've probably worked with 35 over the last 2 years.
That's
But
wild.
yeah, man, but again, it was like no intention to start a marketing agency. It's just when you create these really natural, organic opportunities will pop up. So building out that marketing agency has taken up a lot of my time the last year. One of the things that I've loved about myself or loved about the process is that I've realized, oh, I really love taking care of clients. I love finding these great brands that are smaller, but their ingredients are amazing. The product is amazing. And then we can kind of do what we do best and help them grow so more customers are aware of them. And that's really how we feel like we can impact the food system positively is put these products in front of mind of consumers. And that's the approach that we take anytime we work with a new client. So that's been a big focus for me. And then also our supplement company that you mentioned, Noble Origins, we created that in April of last year, so April of 2023. And that really came from us listening to our audience feedback because we were getting so many questions around, hey, what protein powders do you guys like? What supplements do you guys take? And Harry and I looked at ourselves honestly and just said, we're not really comfortable promoting that much in the market because supplements in particular, there's so many fillers, additives, hidden ingredients. Why are we going to affiliate for a brand that we don't really believe in when we have this engaged audience and we could kind of craft a product from scratch that encompasses a lot of the ingredients that we use every single day that have like ultimately healed my stomach. And that's how Noble came to be is we were like, let's create an animal-based version of Athletic Greens that gives you all the best animal nutrients in a single scoop. So if you take a scoop of Noble, you're getting 25 grams of beef protein isolate. So the protein is coming from the muscle tissue of the cow. It's not whey, which is a milk derivative or a plant-based protein. You're getting actual beef, the muscle tissue of the cow. There's also a grass-fed organ complex. There's colostrum. There's collagen powder. And then it tastes really good because we sweeten it with stevia and then some cacao powder in the chocolate. And then we use vanilla in the vanilla flavor. And then we also have an organs complex too. So that was kind of a good example of audience first, product second. And that's really what the trend that you're seeing in the CPG space in general. It's why Prime is the fastest growing beverage company of all time because Logan Paul, KSI, they have this massive audience. They're like, why don't we just spin up our own products? And that's how a lot of these creators are thinking, like Mr. Beast being another one with Feastables and some of these other products. So we almost are like a mini version of that. So it's a long-winded way of saying my content creation has stagnated a little bit because these two businesses have taken on a life of their own. And I genuinely enjoy building them out so much.
Very cool. And I think, yeah, definitely it's like a new model, right? Build the brand and then build the product, right? Because once you've got this loyal audience of fans that follow you and trust you, they're gonna trust the products as well that you make. So it is kind of like a different way of doing things these days, but certainly it's a model that has worked for you. So I kind of want to switch gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about you as a man of faith. I think it's a big part of your story, right? Your relationship with God. And I'm just curious, have you always been such a man of faith? And how pivotal do you think it's been in you being able to become the man that you are today?
It's a great question. I love this question. I appreciate you asking it. Short answer is that I know I haven't. Was raised Catholic, was baptized when I was a baby, and grew up going to church on Sundays with my parents, but never really felt that deep, intimate connection with the Lord and with Jesus, to be honest with you. And so the last 2 years have been really formative to me. And the reason why I say that is I think, number one, I think when you actually start to eat the right foods, the way that you think and your confidence is so different. One of our guests actually said when you eat the right nutrient dense foods, it allows you to develop like an antenna to God, which I think is incredibly well said. So I think that was part of it the last year. And secondly, I noticed this trait of a lot of the men on the podcast that I actually respected the most, they almost all talked about their connection with the Lord, and most of them were Christian as well. So I thought that there was definitely something to that. I'm like, that's not a coincidence. All the guys that you respect the most are all Christian men. And so that got me really curious. And then my triathlon coach in Austin, Natasha Vander Merwe, she's one of the biggest triathlon coaches in the country. She coached Nick Baer, founder of BPN. She was going to a small startup church in Austin called Thrive. And so I had opened up to her a little bit about my curiosity to start going back to church and just exploring faith and what a relationship with Jesus and the Lord actually means. And she almost like pulled me to go to church. And I always will appreciate her for that. And so Thrive is very different than a Catholic church. It's non-denominational. So
Sure.
you like sing worship songs in the beginning for like 20, 30 minutes. Very fiery, passionate sermons. But I just noticed that the central theme was like really building this like intimate, deep relationship with Christ, which I never felt before growing up Catholic. And the more that I would go, there was just this feeling that's really tough to describe. It just felt right, and it made me realize that there was just a certain piece within me that was missing. And so I ended up making the decision last summer to get rebaptized and have just tried to, really just deepen my relationship with the Lord as much as possible. And it's genuinely been one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. And there's still so much I don't know. There's still so much scriptural knowledge I don't have, still uncomfortable praying in public and things like that. But I think a lot of men think that something is missing and you need to maybe do plant medicine or this crazy ceremony or 75 hard. And, 75 hard is great. Fitness challenges are great. But there's part of me that wonders, like, could you get that same feeling by developing a relationship with the Lord? So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question, man. But it's been a pretty incredible journey.
It's pretty cool. And I agree. I think I've had on a lot of guests that are, devout men of faith, and their relationship with God is just a huge part of who they are and what they've been able to do. And I think now that you said that, maybe some of the more, what some of the guests that I respect the most are those guests. And I think there is definitely a connection there. I think for myself, I've kind of gone in and out of it. I've been to the non-denominational churches and really enjoyed it and really sunk my teeth into it for a while. And then for whatever reason, I'll kind of lose, my touch with the church for a little bit, always maintaining a relationship with God, but perhaps not as much so on a day-to-day basis. But I do think that when you're in it and you're going to church every Sunday and you're going to the Bible study and you're really just, forming these relationships with other people that are very much so people of faith as well, there is just a feeling to it. There is just like, it's almost like you're made whole within that whole process. We were actually supposed to record yesterday, and then you texted me, you said, hey, I got a Bible study going on that's going to kind of creep into our time. Do you mind if we move it to Friday? And it's like, can't get mad at a guy for going to Bible study instead of your podcast.
It's a good excuse to miss the pod. But
That's a good excuse, man. That's a good
yeah.
excuse. I'm curious though, like, and we'll jump off this topic in a second, but I think it's an important one. I really do, and I think it's a one that I don't hear a lot of podcast hosts talk about. But I do just think that entrepreneurs and people, men in general, their faith can be such a big part of their success. Is Bible study something you do on a weekly basis? Do you try and have like conversations with God on a daily basis? Like, curious, like what that actually looks like as far as from like a tactics perspective.
I mean, even myself, it's like the biggest struggle is alternating between feeling in that flow state where as you like go through your day, or if there's like a big sales call or a big decision you have to make, like almost feeling like you're kind of like walking with the Lord as you go throughout your day and you're in constant contact with him. I feel like that's really the ideal state. So I sometimes fluctuate between that and just doing like the box checking things where I'm like, oh, I feel like I have to pray, or I feel like I should read scripture for 15 minutes in the morning. that's a constant struggle. And that's partially why I recently joined this men's group with Harry on Thursdays, because it's run by two older guys that we really respect, who have been, they have a really deep relationship with the Lord. They've been all in on Christ for the last 15 plus years, and they lead it. So it's nice to be discipled by two men that have this like deep scriptural experience and have really lived this lifestyle. And they're also savage businessmen. They co-founded the SaaS company called Jasper, which is the fastest SaaS company to reach a unicorn status, faster than Slack. So
Wow.
I think that was really helpful, of having two guys that I really respect from a business perspective, but also the way that they live their lives, and
Sure.
get discipled by them and have them keep you accountable. I think that's when those big jumps happen. Church is an incredibly important part of your journey with faith, but if you can find a small group or find a mentor, or just something that really keeps you accountable and allows you to go all in more, maybe in a way that you wouldn't on your own in the beginning, I think that's so important. It's similar to like hiring a personal trainer when you're trying to get back into the gym, where you're paying your hard-earned money, you have skin in the game, you don't have to think about it. That person can just kind of kick your ass, and then you look back in 6 months and you're like, oh, well, now I can start to lead myself through a lot of these workouts, and I feel that discipline and I want to work out. I think that's very similar from a faith perspective as well.
Love that, man. Appreciate you being, so just transparent about, your journey with faith there. I think that'll be really helpful to a lot of the listeners. So now I kind of want to transition from God to talking a little beef, man. Let's talk some beef. I think everyone out there is curious. Meat Mafia, Brett, we got to talk some meat. Should we all be eating more beef?
I think we should be. And I think that there is a lot. I think there's been a fair bit of propaganda the last 10 years, I would say, almost brainwashing society to think that meat is the root cause for all disease, which is really interesting to me, because there are a lot of these like cherry pick studies and headlines and things that go really viral. And so you see that, especially in this cheap age of dopamine, where you see a 30-second clip or a headline and you just assume that that's factual and that's truth without digging into the studies. A lot of the research that I found is that the average American only consumes 2 ounces of red meat per day, yet 63% of our calories come in the form of ultra processed foods. So foods that have been artificially injected with salt, sugar, fat in levels that are unnaturally found in nature. So when I extrapolate those two pieces of data, I'm like, I find it very hard to believe that meat is the root cause of all disease if 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, and then the average American is only eating 2 ounces of red meat per day.
Right. That doesn't add
So
up.
that's that. And then you kind of take, I think the other thing with Western medicine is that we're so wired to look at, peer reviewed studies and epidemiological studies, et cetera. And we just cast healing stories as anecdotes that, hey, that's not legit medical literature. That's this one guy saying he did this, when it could be all these other variables. For me to heal, I leaned into those anecdotes because I was listening to Western medicine. I was on the drugs. I was following the diet they were telling me to follow, and I didn't feel good. And yet, the more that I drifted from that and leaned in on these other people that were sharing their healing experiences going carnivore that had similar diseases to me, that was the gateway that allowed me to heal. And I don't know of any other patient in my doctor's history that has actually gotten someone off of these drugs. You're supposed to be in on your drugs for the rest of your life. And so for me, I've just found that, red meat grown from a really good quality ranch where the cow is raised out in pasture. They're not confined in this feedlot like a lot of the industrial model makes these cattle to be. When they're out on grass, they're happy, they're low stress. The farmer takes amazing care of the land. They're actually able to regenerate the soil. When a cow that's raised healthy is like pooping, they're fertilizing the soil. And so the soil is getting really nutrient dense. And that's ultimately what's happened through this industrial model, is that because we specialize these cows to get them as fat as possible, as quickly as possible, so we can get a really good price point for them, we've absolutely decimated our soil too. So I would guarantee you that if regenerative farms across the country started popping up and we had more cattle, that the overall environmental footprint in this country would get better 1000%.
So basically, it comes down to eat happy cows and live a happy life.
Eat happy cows, eat a happy life. And Brett, the one caveat that I do want to make is that health it seems so complicated on social media, where if you scroll through your feed, you'll have five different people telling you five different things about nutrition. And so there's certain people that are like, if it's not grass fed, grass finished, it's terrible. Just eat more meat, eat fruit, eat vegetables, don't eat vegetables. What I found with beef is I learned this from two ranchers that are really close friends of ours. They're called Holy Cow Beef. They're based out of Lubbock, Texas. Amazing husband and wife couple. They've been ranching for 2 decades, and they have what they call the good, better, best model.
Okay.
Where all their theory is that all meat is good meat, even if it's industrial meat. So if you're eating cheap meat from the grocery store in New York, that's still better than the processed crap in the inner aisle of the grocery store. Better is actually getting like grass finished meat, which is what we were talking about, where the cow has been low stress. They're eating grass for the entirety of their lives, which is their evolutionarily consistent diet. They're not eating corn, they're not eating soy. And then best is grass finished cattle from like a local rancher, ideally maybe 15 to 30 minutes away from you. But the point is that don't put too much pressure on yourself. When I started going carnivore, all I could afford were like the cheaper cuts of meat at the grocery store in New York that were
Sure.
probably the industrial model. And that made me feel really good. That actually got me off all the drugs and meds that I was on. And now I'm able to, in Texas, there are a lot of great local farms and ranches that I can buy meat from, but it's a progression to get there. You don't have to start at 100%. Just start eating a gram of protein per pound of your ideal body weight, and really, really good things are going to happen just from that one switch.
And the cheap cuts of meat in New York City are still by no means actually cheap.
I remember at Whole Foods in 2018, you could get a ribeye for like 17, $18 a pound. And now it's like 28, $30 a
For
pound. It's
sure.
crazy the way that prices have gone up.
Oh, it's wild. Going to Whole Foods and dropping $400 is like, it's the easiest thing you can do these days. But so that's good to know, I think, because a lot of people, I think, they look at beef and they say, well, I don't want to eat the cheap beef because that's the beef that's going to give me cancer. When really there are people out there that believe that that's the opposite. That really, like, all beef is good beef. Work your way up the ladder. Start where you can. Um, what about the China study? Isn't that what people point to a lot? Isn't that like that book, the China study? Didn't that get a lot of people kind of thinking negatively about meat in general?
What did the China study exactly say? I'm not super familiar with it.
China study, I think, was like some widespread, study in China that I think, ultimately pointed towards meat being the cause for cancer and all other types of diseases. I'm sure there's lots of holes, in that argument. I was just curious if you had read the book or if you'd heard about it or anything like that.
So what I tend to focus on,
Yeah,
I think as a society, we've lost our ability to understand what foods and inputs actually make me feel good. And so what I focused on is when I was healing, I literally kept a journal where I would record what I was eating, what time I was eating, and then how my energy levels felt on a scale of 1 to 4. So 4 feeling like I could run a marathon, 1 feeling like I wanted to pass out under my desk. And the common denominator for me was that the more single ingredient animal products I was eating, I felt really good. And then in addition to that, I was pairing that with blood work. So I would get blood work on a quarterly basis. And I recommend that for anyone. There's so many great telemedicine companies out there where they'll literally send a nurse to your house. You can get your blood work done and you'll have your results back in a few weeks, a few days. And the blood work doesn't lie. And I'm telling you that if you're swapping the processed crap for single ingredient foods that are made by God, your blood work should reflect scores in the right direction. Where like your waist size should decrease, which is your biggest signifier of actual metabolic health. Your resting blood sugar should get better. Your lipid panel should get better. Your resting heart rate should go down because you should be losing weight and your body should be metabolically functioning on a better level. So I always just focus on, I don't really look at the studies that much. I just focus on what makes me feel good and does my blood work advocate for what I'm doing.
is red meat the most nutrient dense of all meats?
Red meat is the most nutrient dense of all meats, especially if it's grass finished. This professor at Utah State, this guy Stefan Van Vliet, he's done some really interesting studies that actually show the nutrient benefits of eating higher quality meat. And one of his studies actually shows that eating grass finished bison has a higher omega-6 profile than wild caught salmon, which is
Whoa,
crazy.
that is
Yeah.
wild. That is wild. So, give me a couple things we should take out of our diet. We got to add animal products in. What are one or two things you think that we should try and remove or at least lessen?
So what I do is the way that I shop at the grocery store is I really just I live in the outer aisle of the grocery store
Cool.
because that's actually where the real because if all you're doing is just eating single ingredient real foods, your body actually knows how to use that and metabolize it because it's what we're evolutionarily designed to eat. When you're eating these processed foods in the inner aisle of the grocery store, your hunger signals, all of these things start to actually get out of whack, and they're scientifically designed to be addictive. So like a bag of Doritos, for example, they have food scientists that are measuring the exact combination of like saltiness, umami, sweetness, crunch factor. They combine all these things together so they're hyper palatable, which means you literally can't stop eating them. So you're not going in for a handful of Doritos, you're crushing that entire bag. Like I've been there many, many times. So what I do is I avoid that and I just stick at the outer aisle of the grocery store. So I'm buying red meat, I'm buying chicken. If you like fish, eat fish. If you like pork, eat pork. Eggs, good quality raw dairy. Actually, good quality grass finished dairy. It's tough to get raw dairy depending on the state that you're in. Some fruits, some vegetables, and then I just combine all those foods. And I've gotten to a point where I know how many pounds of meat do I need on a daily basis to make me feel really good. That number is about 2 pounds of meat for me. So I'm going to buy 14 pounds of meat when I go to the grocery store,
Sure.
and I'll throw in some ground beef. I'll throw in some ribeyes. I'll throw in some chicken thighs, whatever. I just I combine all those things. And then the only time I'm going in the inner aisle is for a particular purpose. So if I'm getting like beef tallow, which is a great cooking fat where you basically render the fat of the animal, and it's got a really high smoke point. I'll buy some beef tallow in the inner aisle. I'll buy some sparkling water. I'll buy some coffee, spices, pork rinds, maybe. That's really all. I have a very particular purpose for how I'm going to the inner aisle. But
Very cool.
basically, anything out of a package or a box, I'm staying away from for the most part. I'm staying away from industrial seed oils and vegetable oils. Those got really popular about 50 years ago because
Sure.
there were studies that were showing that it would lower your LDL cholesterol. They're complete bullshit. They're literally made through like a 15 to 20 step process in a machine. So I cook with beef tallow. I cook with duck fat. I cook with pork lard. I cook with ghee. Ghee is just clarified butter. So I
But
just have
just regular butter's no good. We can't just cook with the old
no.
fashioned stuff.
You definitely can. The thing with regular butter is that the smoke point is a lot lower.
Okay.
So if you're cranking a steak on a cast iron and you have that thing at high heat, the butter will actually turn black and it'll burn.
Got it.
Where because the ghee is clarified, it actually has a much higher smoke point, so you can get your pan really hot and it shouldn't burn on you. And beef tallow is the same way too.
Makes sense. Do you stay away from like bread? Is bread something that you stay away from?
It's a good question. I stay away from it, I would say 90% of the time. And I kind of like choose my moments because the important thing too is like you need to be a human being and enjoy life. And bread, pasta, pizza, these things are absolutely delicious. So like I said, right, when I go back to Jersey, the Italian food is incredible. The pizza is incredible. Like I'm going to enjoy those meals with my family. I'm not going to go to a pizzeria or a great meal and like not eat those things. I actually think that's probably unhealthier to deprive yourself of that experience because I do think there's this like intangible aspect of nourishment, which is just sharing meals with people that you love and you care about. But I pick and choose it. So like during the week, I probably won't eat any bread. I probably won't eat any pasta. But maybe on like a Saturday, Sunday, if I go to a really good restaurant, like a steakhouse, and there's some bone marrow with like a side of garlic bread, like I'll have a piece or two of it and I'll feel totally fine. But I choose those moments. I don't deprive myself, but I choose the moments to enjoy.
So quickly, give me just like an average day of eating for you. If we're avoiding bread, we're avoiding seed oils, we're just shopping on the outskirts of the supermarket. Like, how do we make that enjoyable?
Yeah, there's two ways to do it. I think it's pretty simple either way. So in the morning, I tend to train at the gym fasted, so I'll have some coffee with a little bit of heavy cream in there just to get a little bit of fat in my diet. I'll go have a good training session, maybe like hour and a half. Get into the office, do a couple hours of work. I actually keep an air fryer at the office. And so for lunch, it'll be probably close to a pound of steak, maybe some chicken thighs. I would say 90% of the time it's red meat. Sometimes I'll just eat the red meat. If I have vegetables, I'll throw like some broccoli or sweet potato in the air fryer as well with the steak and kind of have a great meal. And then because you're loading your body with so many nutrients, so much good quality saturated fat from that cut of meat, I probably won't need to eat for 6 to 8 hours. And then for dinner, I'll just have like a kind of a replica of that too. So I keep it really, really
Simple.
simple. There's also this guy that I just started using this week that's got this great meal prep service where he'll do all the cooking for you. My
Cool.
schedule is starting to get busier, so I'm trying to outsource certain decisions. And so he dropped off 12 meals a couple days ago with like the exact combinations of meat and vegetables. And it probably averages out to $14-15 a meal. Um, but even if it was more expensive than that, I would do it because the time that I'm saving, the quality of food, how good it tastes, I don't think you can put a price on that. But yeah, man, it's really just two big meals a day. If I feel hungry in between lunch and dinner, I will make a protein shake with our Noble protein powder. And so my go-to recently, because it's so damn hot in Texas, I've just been wanting more fruit. I'll throw some frozen berries, 2 scoops of the Noble vanilla, which is 50 grams of protein, some water, and a little bit of heavy cream in there too, just to kind of cream it up a little bit more. And then I just blend that up, drink it, about 60-ish grams of protein, and then I'm good to go until
There you
dinner.
go. Cream it up,
Cream it
buddies.
up, yeah. Cream
So,
it up.
so we like to talk on this show about resilience and, how just doing hard things is a bit of an art form. I think that anyone who's doing big things in this world, making a great impact, has become pretty good at delaying gratification. They've become pretty good at doing things that they don't necessarily want to do in the moment. So I'm just curious, are there any communities or habits that you kind of anchor yourself in that allows you to continue to do the hard things in your life that have allowed you to become who you are today?
Yeah, another great question, man. I think it's so easy when you watch people like Andrew Huberman or some of these other experts that are out there to misconstrue this concept of like the morning routine. So I see a lot of these biohackers or productivity specialists or influencers, content creators, whatever it is, that have this like super elaborate 15-step morning routine. I've tried to do that before. Honestly, for me, it just always added a lot of stress and anxiety. The most impactful thing, whether I was in my early 20s or even right now, is like getting up with the amount of sleep that I need. For some people, that's 8 hours. For some, that's seven. That's six. That's five. Whatever that number is for you. And I get up. I don't check my phone. I drink my coffee or my pre-workout, and then I just get to the gym as quickly as possible by like 5:30 a.m. And if all you did was just get a morning workout in at 5 a.m., I will guarantee that your life would change because it leads to so many compounding benefits. And so the gym that I go to, a lot of other successful people are training at that time in the morning. So I'm connecting with all these amazing people. They're building respect for me because I'm becoming a fixture in that gym. And I think it just kind of allows you to punch above your weight. And so when I do hard things in the morning physically and I run towards that friction where I'm like, hey, I don't want to do a set of pull-ups, therefore I'm going to go do a set of pull-ups, or I don't want a cold plunge, therefore I'm going to go in the cold plunge for an extra minute. I notice that those running towards that friction allows me to run towards friction with my business because where I'm at now is I'm a few steps away of doing these like simple, unsexy tasks that are really important that will allow us to really blow this thing up and ideally set up my family for financial freedom. And so I've just been reevaluating like what does true hard work look like? What in a healthy way, what's like the closest to 100% of breath that I could throw in and into my business, into my relationship with my girlfriend, into my friendships, and I keep a very strict list of priorities because like as you start to grow your following, your notoriety, more people kind of want to latch themselves on you. They want to get dinner, they want to get coffee. My mindset right now is like, will this decision make the boat go faster? And so like my boat is the business, my relationship with God. And if it doesn't fill that cup, I'm just kind of cutting out of my life. And I'm really like pruning that tree right now.
Sure. I think that's pretty powerful. I think a lot of us can get a lot farther by taking a few things out of our life as opposed to adding more in, adding the meditation, adding the journaling, adding the ice plunge, adding all that. Like you probably don't need all of that stuff. And I agree. Sometimes when you're trying to make all those dominoes fall in the morning and get through a 17-step morning routine, you look up at the clock, you're like, it's 11:15 a.m. I haven't done a damn thing. Let's get ready to do damn things. So yeah, I could totally see that. Curious, like what's your like average day look like? Do you kind of like block off your time hour by hour? Or are you more of a to-do lister? Like how do you attack your tasks on a daily basis?
Yeah, I would say I'm more of a to-do list kind of person. But what I'm trying to transition to is that with these three separate arms of the business, the marketing agency, Noble, the podcast media arm of what we do, they're three very, very different skill sets. So I've been working on trying to time batch my tasks better. I'm still definitely in the beginner stages of this. So, dedicating an hour to 2 hours of Noble, then doing podcasting work, then doing agency work, where I think historically it's kind of been this mixture of both, where you're just constantly activating these different parts of your brain,
Sure.
and also just having almost a mental reframe of, hey, I'm this guy that has a podcast and a supplement company and an agency, to I'm someone that builds health and wellness businesses. And how does that person actually operate? And the only way this is going to work is if we continue to build out a great team and a great culture and delegate a lot of these tasks. And the more that I hold on to these certain tasks, like sales, like different parts of the podcast, et cetera, it's actually going to bottleneck and hinder a lot of things. So we've been working really hard the last year to bring on an amazing team and like delegate that work. And what you find is that when you have a great team and a great culture, a lot of these people can do these tasks way better than you. And it creates this mental freedom where you can focus on the highest leverage things that how you should be spending your time on. That's been a big reframe, going from individual contributor to founder. And then what should a founder actually care about?
Very cool. Do you try and leave your work at the office? Like, do you get there at 9, leave at 5, and try and leave it there? Or would you say you're more of like the type of guy who's working pretty much all day long?
I suck at leaving it at the office, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of founders would say that, especially when you've pretty much invested everything and burned all the ships. You're like, it's a bet, right? It's an act of faith. Like, my mindset is like, we have to make this work, and I know we're going to make this work, and I'm okay bringing that work home. And I don't bring it home every night too. There are definitely nights where I'm like, hey, I put in a good day's work. I just want to chill a little bit and watch a little bit of Game of Thrones and just take my mind off things. I think
Love it.
that's great. But
I
I think
love it.
there's also this tendency where you're like, oh, like, what I don't want to get to is, hey, there are these 2 to 3 things that I really need to do, but instead of doing them, I'm going to watch Game of Thrones or do this, like, have this cheap form of entertainment that's going to make me feel really good in the morning, or really good at night, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to be upset with myself for not doing those things. That's the big thing that I'm trying to avoid.
So you make your list and you knock it out every day. And if you knock it out, then you'll give yourself some grace to watch some Game of Thrones. I think that's a pretty good policy. And before we wrap up here, I'm always kind of curious. As someone who's obviously good at kind of fighting through the resistance that crops up once in a while, I think we all feel that. We feel a little laziness in our bones. We feel a little resistance to the work we know we should be doing. If you ever feel that during the day, are there any mantras or any questions that you ask yourself internally on a daily basis to kind of help yourself keep going?
Yeah, I continue. The most powerful thing for me is, especially because I turned 30 a couple months ago, and I find that as men start to have this generational transition of going from your 20s into your 30s, I think there's just something that biologically changes where you're starting to feel, hey, I do want to get married, I do want to have children, I want to be able to provide for my family. And so I think the biggest reminder for me is that if I'm lazy or I don't want to do these critical tasks, it's not just negatively impacting me, it's like going to be impacting my future family. And that's always something that's worked for me. And it's not perfect, but it doesn't even have to be family. It's just, what is this, like, just having this vision of this macro level goal and really journaling on that and reflecting on that and meditating on that and seeing yourself, like, actually feeling what that would feel like to have those accomplishments that you want to have, the physique that you want to have, the money in your bank account. Like, we think this stuff is hippy dippy woo woo, but these are success principles that have gone back for the last 1,000 years. So for me, it's just anchoring in on that vision and realizing every single day every single second, honestly, man, is either going to pull me closer to that or it's going to detract me from that. And it's my choice, and taking ownership of that. And anytime like a victim mentality pops into my head, which it definitely can, just trying to eviscerate that thought as quickly as possible, because I've chosen to do this. If I didn't want to do something that was difficult, I could have stayed in a cushy sales job or a corporate job. I chose to go the more difficult path, and now I need to ultimately own those decisions. And this is all on me, and it's a beautiful thing.
Hell yeah, brother. It is a beautiful thing. Brett Ender, dude. Thank you for being with us today, man. Where can everyone follow you online? Keep up with all the cool stuff you got going on.
I love you, brother. Dude, I cannot wait to see the direction of this show. I love the way that you ask questions. I think this is really what you're meant to be doing. So it's cool to be on the receiving end of that. So I appreciate you for having me on. But yeah, I would say Twitter is probably the best place to connect with me. And my handle is at Meat Mafia Brett. Our supplement company is Noble Origins, which is nobleorigins.com. And yeah, man, I think that's the best place to connect.
There it is, guys. Awesome show. Everyone out there, thank you for being with us today. And remember, this week you will feel resistance to the work you know you should be doing. In those moments of resistance, lean into your why and take action anyway. We'll see you next week, guys.